Alright, hello Foodies, welcome into another one. This one is going to be a fun one and we've got a lot to cover, so I am not going to do much of an intro here. We are going to be ranking all 26 killers in Dead by Daylight. If you are popping in here maybe later in the future, just know this is before Sadako from The Ring has been released. That will be coming in about 2 months, so she will not be on this list. However, I am pretty excited to get into this because I've wanted to do this one for a while, but I really wanted to hammer it out and make sure that I felt good about my ranking. So I've finally come up with a list that I can live with, and we're going to break that down. Now, it's pretty popular to do tier list, but instead of doing tier list, what I'm going to do is a ranking, 26 to number 1, right? We start with the worst, we get to the best. Along the way, I do think we will break them into tiers and just kind of give you a general idea of where they would be on a tier list. But this isn't a tier list, this is just a ranking, so take it with a grain of salt. And before we get going, I do want to put one thing out there, because I think it's important in a game like Dead by Daylight where there are constantly so many new players. You may be watching this and you may be watching to think, okay, well, who should I play? But that's not the way to use this, right? This is not a measurement of who you should play. At some point, I do think I'll do one of which killers I find fun to play, because sometimes there are really good killers that I don't enjoy playing as very much, and there's some pretty bad killers that I do enjoy playing. So, for example, I am a Clown main. Clown was one of the worst killers in the game. So obviously he's not going to be very high on this list, but if I did it off of fun, I put Clown up there. I really enjoy playing as Clown. So don't look at this as me telling you who you should play, who you shouldn't play. If your favorite killer is in the bottom 5, it's not because I hate that killer. It's just because I find them underwhelming against good teams. And the term good teams really does show you exactly what my thinking is here. I am not concerned with what you do against Ash rank survivors, against the lowest common denominator. I am saying, okay, so let's say you're going up against a pretty good team. Not necessarily against the most optimal team you could imagine, because, you know, if you go against that, any killer can lose, and pretty badly. This is going to be, let's say you are facing a pretty good team, and you're playing pretty well yourself. How are you going to do more often than not? Without further ado, I do want to hop right into this one, so let's go on and start the ranking. The first 7 killers here are going to be in what I consider D tier, and number 26 is the Legion. Now, Legion was never a very good killer, right? In terms of how Legion performs against really good teams, Legion has never been one to really excel above the pack. However, things have actually gotten worse for this poor killer who has a massive fan base, and I feel really bad for all the Legion mains out there. But where Legion was already not a very good killer, Legion got way worse when Circle of Healing came into the game and became a big deal. Now, in case you don't know, Circle of Healing is a boon perk where survivors can go off, they can bless a totem, and all of a sudden they can heal each other at lightning fast speeds. This is a problem for nearly every killer, but it's a massive problem for Legion, because Legion's whole thing is about injuring the entire team and keeping them injured. The issue with that is you bounce around, right? You hit, let's say you hit a Meg, then you hit a Jane, and then you hit a Jeff, and yada yada, right? You hit the whole team. But by the time you've finished your frenzy, and maybe you're starting your chase with somebody else, 2-3 survivors have already healed, and usually healing against Legion is a bad idea. So Legion had slowly been working their way up my ranking of the killers, because they had been made a little more deadly over time, and they really had this special ability to keep people injured. The issue for Legion now is that the survivors who used to maybe not be super smart, they would go and they would self-care against the Legion, which obviously takes a really, really long time to self-care against Legion, especially if they have, say, Thanatophobia or Sloppy Butcher or anything that's going to make it take longer to heal. Those same survivors are no longer using self-care. More often than not, what they'll be doing now is going to a boon, to a Circle of Healing totem, and they'll be healing up rapidly, and they're not really wasting nearly as much time as they once did. Legion still does have some positives, and that's the thing. So, right, I don't have anybody I put in F tier. Every killer is viable to a certain extent. In the case of Legion, though, the thing that Legion does really well is the thing that is really far from the meta right now, really the opposite of the meta right now. Legion is all about keeping people injured, and keeping people injured, is very difficult unless your name is Plague. Legion has a really cool whole, gimmick in the sense of the 4-in-1, and they have this cool look, and a lot of people resonate with them, and they have a very large fan base. And if Circle of Healing were to fall out of favor, if it were to get reworked to be substantially weaker or entirely different, I think Legion would climb up this list rather dramatically. Not to get into the A tier, the B tier, but they'd get into the C tier if they could get up there. If those changes were made, that is. But, we can't we can't rank them on the assumption of what's going to happen, because obviously very strong, very broken things have been left in the game for a very long time. So we're going off the assumption that Circle of Healing stays really good. And because Circle of Healing is so strong, Feral Frenzy is just kind of a joke right now. Again, can you play Legion and can you 4K against a good team? Yeah, you can. You can do that with any killer. But they really do have the least going for them right now, because their power is directly countered by the meta, and once you take their power out of it, they are just a basic M1 killer, which is obviously not doing them any favors. So I hate to do it, but Legion is coming in at the bottom at number 26. At number 25, we have Amanda Young, the Pig. Now, there are a few stealth killers in DBD, and the stealth meta is definitely out right now. The stealth meta is not in. However, there is a massive issue with Amanda that other stealth killers actually don't have to deal with, that being that her stealth actively hurts her. So when Amanda goes to crouch and she wants to chase people around, or she wants to sneak up on people, right? She loses so much of her line of sight and her speed. Two aspects of her kit are drastically nerfed whenever she wants to go into her stealth mode. And even then, you can't really justify the stealth, because if you want to attack somebody, you're going to make that large roar sound. You're going to hear the unsheathing of the weapon. She's really the worst stealth killer in quite a few ways. And that's very sad, because just like Legion, the Pig has one of the more dedicated followings of all the killers. And I really, really wish this was a better killer, because honestly, she's probably my favorite to go up against. I love facing pigs. I think that the whole helmet mechanic she has, the bear traps, those are great. The reverse bear traps, that is. A different guy has bear traps. We'll be talking about him soon. But the reverse bear traps are a really cool mechanic, and they are a passive slowdown in some ways. I mean, they're active in that you have to put them on, but they're passive in that you can put it on and just kind of forget about it. The only reason that I really considered the Pig to be better than Legion is because really good pigs can actually use her dash mid-chase and get some cheeky hits that they would not get otherwise. So she's not quite just an M1 killer, and she does have that passive slowdown. So those are both nice, but not super great. Those are decent things for her kit. You're never going to get a head pop with the reverse bear trap, so you can't count on those for any lethality. Basically, you want to stall the game as much as you can and start playing a war of attrition with Pig. Is it an unwinnable situation? No. By no means, no. However, she has a lot of things working against her, and I think what's so frustrating about Pig is just some minor buffs would actually make her a lot better. So make it to where she's a little faster when she's crouched. Make it to where she doesn't make so much noise when she wants to come out of ambush. Make it so that if a pig positions themselves correctly, they actually get a hit, instead of leaving it up to more of like a 50-50 to if the survivors are paying attention or not. Another thing I would like to see for Pig is when she goes into stealth mode, I would like Spine Chill not to pick it up, because I think right now Spine Chill nerfs Pig extremely hard, and I think Spine Chill is just an absolute S tier perk. It's an amazing perk. And while I'm not saying that every stealth killer should out and out, counter Spine Chill, I do think Pig should be an exception, because she loses so much when she goes into stealth. It would be nice that, I talk about the 50-50 of are they paying attention or not. I play with Spine Chill all the time, and I'll have it where Spine Chill will light up for a little longer than I'm comfortable with, and I'll be like, okay, well, it's a Myers, or it's a Ghostface, or it's a Pig, and I'll start looking around, and I am ready to go. I look for my escape strategy, and I'm ready to go. So by the time I hear that roar, the unsheathing of the blade, I'm out of there. Pig is a very fun killer to play as and play against, but she is not super viable. Not just in the current meta. Hers almost has nothing to do with Circle of Healing in the current rapid heal meta. She's weak for a variety of different reasons, and I just can't put her any higher than 25. Next up at 24, we have the cover boy, the poster child, the Trapper. Now, you may look at it and you may say, well, he's on the cover and he's inspired by Jason Voorhees, so obviously he's going to be good. But if you've played the game for any amount of time, you've probably realized he's not that good. He actually leaves a lot to be desired, and I'm going to explain very briefly why it is that killers like the Trapper struggle. Now, Trapper's whole thing is that he is a setup killer. He starts with some traps, he goes around, he sets those traps, and then he tries, if you're playing him properly, he tries to herd survivors into a little death zone he's created, where all of a sudden, traps are everywhere, especially where you least expect them. The problem with this, though, is multiple. Actually, there are multiple problems. That was not great English on my part. There are multiple problems with this strategy. So, firstly, really good survivors tend to know a lot of the popular places to put traps. They tend to know that window's going to have a trap. Oh, there's going to be a trap in that tall grass. They're going to expect it. They have a bit of a sixth sense for where you're going to put your traps. In addition to that, even if they aren't sure, traps are not hard to see. They're actually rather blatant, especially on indoor maps. Indoor maps can be crazy for how easy to see traps are, and it's not a thing where you're going to run into them very often if you're not prompted to by the trapper. And every time they come up with a cheeky spot where, you know, all of a sudden you can find one that, oh, look at that, some of the trap doesn't show if I put it here because it clips into this or that in the environment. Behavior is usually pretty quick about patching that out. You know, there was a great spot in the hatch you could, not the hatch, I'm sorry, in the shack you could put them, and only a little bit of the trap would show. And I see where they thought that was kind of unfair, but you know, that's the thing is, Trapper can only hide his traps so much, and survivors know that. In addition to that, if they have a map, it's done. It's done. If they have a map, they can see where your traps are, and all of a sudden, the game is going to get a lot harder for you. They're going to go around and they're going to pop your traps, and your whole time is going to go really downhill really fast. Now, that's not to say Trapper has no strengths. Firstly, Trapper does reward creativity in a way that a lot of killers just simply can't. If you are creative with where you put your traps, if you put them in unorthodox places and play around that, you can fool even good survivors. In addition to that, Trapper is actually pretty good about defending the basement and other strong locations like that, traditionally strong areas for killers. He can cut off loops, and if you find yourself in a position where you can get a survivor or two down in the basement, suddenly it does get to be a scarier prospect for survivors. However, this is far from perfect because there are still things they can do about that. Firstly, they can dead hard through your traps. In case you didn't know, survivors have a perk called dead hard where they basically become invincible while they sprint forward for a very short distance. They can do that over a trap and it won't register. It will not register that the trap has hit them. And unfortunately, you're going to see that a lot because dead hard is brought in every game. You are not going to play a game where nobody has dead hard. And lastly, another weakness of Trapper would be that he's one of the easier callouts. So let's say you have a team that's on comms of some kind. They are going to see a trap in the beginning of the match and they're going to say, hey, it's a trapper. And all of a sudden, they go on high alert. They're going to do one of a few things. They're going to start looking around, watching their step, and they're going to start hammering gens because they know that they have a window of time where the trapper's not interested in chasing them. He's interested in getting his traps down. Unfortunately, there are just too many holes in Trapper's game, and I cannot recommend him as a particularly good killer. But with that being said, he has upside, and I do appreciate that he rewards creativity. I just think that there are too many things that are almost backbreaking for him to be any higher than he is, but I would say that he's pretty clearly better than Legion and Pig right now, so I feel comfortable putting him at 24. I wish he was a little better at several things, but as it stands, he could be worse. He's not garbage tier, but he's not great. Next up at 23, we have the Clown. Now, the Clown is my boy. This is my main. I love the Clown. I enjoy his playstyle. I enjoy a lot of things about him. But I have to admit, one of the things I really enjoy about him is that it is a pressure-free playthrough because you do not go in expecting to win. The Clown has a lot of weaknesses in this game. Now, just to give a brief overview of his power, because it is extremely simple, the Clown has two types of bottles. He has purple bottles and he has yellow bottles. The purple bottles slow survivors down. The yellow bottles make him and the survivors, anybody that steps in them, go much faster. I've heard a lot of people say the yellow bottles are useless. I don't actually agree with this. I think that they are pretty useful for getting around the map for a killer that really was F tier in terms of mobility. He can get around the map more quickly, especially if he uses add-ons to add 2-3 seconds to how long he's invigorated. But with that being said, it is a minor thing. It's not a massive thing that's going to bump him up to being a good mobility killer. But more so than getting around the map, what he can use it for is mobility in loops. If you use your yellow bottles correctly in loops, you can get hits that you would not have gotten as the former Clown, as the Clown without the yellow bottles. It's trickier to learn, but if you put enough time into this killer, you can learn how to use the yellow bottles at loops. And, you know, I say if you put enough time in, the most basic trick is extremely simple. You throw down a yellow bottle, and then while it's turning from gray to yellow, because it takes about, I think, a second and a half or something to turn yellow, you throw a purple bottle to slow them down. By the time it turns, you are speedy, they are slowed, and either they have to throw the pallet they're at or you get a hit. And it's really, really a lovely situation for Clown. So he does have that going for him. And you know, the purple bottles, while they're not the most powerful things in the game, one thing that they have going for them is they're very easy. They are very easy not only to hit the survivors with the radius of the gas cloud that's created, but to actually hit them with the bottle and hinder them extra. Bottle tosses are not that hard, and thankfully, Clown is not penalized for holding a bottle. So if you have a bottle out as Clown, you do not slow down. In a lot of killer powers in DBD, they slow you down to use them. If you want to zap somebody as Trapper, if you want to hit them with Nemi's Tentacle before he's tier 3, all those things slow you down, and that's for a lot of killers. In the case of Clown, he is still moving at 115, so at least he doesn't slow down when he's doing that, and it gives you some more flexibility in operating those loops. He does have some pretty strong add-ons, nothing that makes him busted or crazy, but pretty strong add-ons. I would say the Thick Cork add-on is a great one if you want basically insta-reloads. Anything that's going to give you extra bottles is nice. Redhead's Pinky Finger just recently got a bit of a nerf that's going into the PTB, but it's still one of the stronger add-ons in the game, so do consider using that if you want to have some wins as Clown, but I wouldn't advise it if you're trying to learn Clown, because it gives you an unrealistic expectation, in the same way that using Iridescent Head as Huntress is going to give you an inaccurate understanding of how that killer works. Overall, Clown is really, really good in one-on-one chases, but he lacks map pressure, his mobility is very poor, and more often than not, he's going to find himself in a position of trailing. He's going to find that the first 2 gens pop pretty quickly without much he can do about it. So against really good teams, it's hard. It's very hard to play Clown. But that being said, his skill in the chase is pretty considerable. He's almost, I don't know, there are a lot of killers that are really good in one-on-ones, and Clown is just slightly worse than a lot of them. But, you know, overall, he's a solid killer. He really got a lot better after his buff. It took him from being probably the worst killer in the game to just one of the worst, which may sound like I'm mocking the buff, but for me, as somebody who puts a lot of time into Clown, that's all I needed. I am very happy with that. So I can put Clown here, and I can be pretty happy with that. And, yeah, I don't know. Could I stand for him to be buffed a little more? Yeah, I could. I would give him more bottles, or I would buff his Invigoration status effect, or maybe remove the time it takes for Invigoration to take effect. There are all kinds of little things they could do. But overall, he's in a place where he could stand to be buffed a little, but it's nothing too crazy, and I'm very happy with him in this spot. Number 22, we have The Shape, Michael Myers. Now, he is debatably the greatest slasher in the history of cinema, but he's definitely not the best killer in this game. Michael's big issue is that he is pitifully weak for the early part of the game. So Michael's power is pretty simple. He has to stalk people, which I think is really cool. I like that they were able to incorporate something from his character in the movies in a way that's very true to him. And what he has to do is he has to stare at survivors until he levels up in his tier. So he can go from tier 1 to tier 2. At tier 2, he becomes a normal movement speed M1 killer. Nothing special there. You are still operating at a bit of a deficit because you're a killer without a power. But then he can go to tier 3, where he can insta-down people, he vaults more quickly, and he becomes a bit more of a terror. What you want to do with Michael is you want to hit tier 3 and you want to down as many people as possible. You want to snowball, you want to slug. The issue with that is you're very often going to find survivors running perks that are going to be anti-slug. So Unbreakable, which is a Bill Overbeck perk, is very, very common, and you're going to see it. I'm not going to say every game, but most games. You're going to see it most games. So slugging is very, very risky, and obviously you do have other perks that are going to make that a little harder. Jonah Vasquez came out with a boon that makes it where you can't slug them. So if you hear a boon go off, you don't want to do that. Because they could have the Jonah Vasquez perk, which I can't actually remember the name of, or they might have, again, Circle of Healing, so if they're in that range, they can pick them up rather quickly. They could have We're Gonna Live Forever, which makes it to where they pick up survivors off of the ground 100% quicker. There are a lot of things working against slugging, which is kind of the issue. If slugging was a little stronger than it is right now, Michael would be a little stronger than he is right now, but it's not, so he's not, right? Basic logic there. Another thing working against Michael is that his stalking power is a little finicky. So sometimes you'll think you 99'd it, because what you want to do is you want to 99 your tier 2, and then with only 1% more needed, you want to get really close to someone, pop tier 3, and get easy down. That's the ideal way to play Michael. The issue is that because of maybe it's latency issues, maybe it's something else, I don't know if it's ping, I don't know. But what you see a lot of is accidental tier 3s, or maybe not quite getting tier 3 when you intended to, because something doesn't sync up on both the survivor and the killer's side, and suddenly your planning goes out the window, and it's really unfortunate. It's not the biggest thing in the world, but again, it's just another little weakness, and when you're comparing killers, little weaknesses can add up. Michael, he's got a terrible early game, and if you can't capitalize on the snowball, you're going to suffer, and really good survivors teams are probably going to spread out when Michael gets to tier 3. They're going to be very careful around him. And there are also things like borrowed time, which can make it where tier 3 doesn't matter nearly as much. So Michael, while I will acknowledge he's one of the better snowball killers in the game, he's really taken a beating in public perception, and it's going to be a while before he gets back to being respectable. That said, I also put him in the tier of killers that are fun to play as and against. So if you're new to the game and you're looking for somebody to try, maybe give Michael, give him a few games, see if you like his playstyle. I do think Michael's fun. I just can't really put him any higher than I have. Right now he's at 22. I'd like to see him climb up a little more, but we're okay with 22. Next up, we have number 21, the Ghostface. Right, so this is a killer I really struggled with because I wanted to put him so much higher because he's very fun. But the issue I have with him is kind of similar to Michael. It's kind of similar to what I have with actually a few of these in the bottom tier here, is that he's essentially an M1 killer. He doesn't have much of a power. So Ghostface can go into Night Shroud, and all of a sudden he drops his red stain, he drops his terror radius, and you do not know where he is unless you have Spine Chill, which again counters all stealth killers. And when he's in that mode, he is at his most deadly, right? So it makes it to where he can get a little more creative at loops where he can break line of sight. However, there are a lot of issues with this. So firstly, I'm not going to harp on this. It's been covered enough by the DBD community. People using stretch res monitors can actually break Ghostface out of his stalking ability at places where they are not supposed to be able to break him out of that. And until they get that fixed, that's going to be a major mark against this character. But in addition to that, he has this interesting thing where he can fill up his meter like Michael can, except instead of filling it up to where he can start downing everybody instantly, he can do it on an individual basis. So in an ideal situation, maybe he takes everyone and he gets them all 99'd, and then he starts popping off and he can down them all. But more realistically, what happens is, maybe you get the stalk in on a few survivors a game, and maybe you get them, maybe you don't. If they have a lot of pallets to work with, you're kind of screwed because, again, he's an M1 killer. He can't do like Nurse and teleport through pallets. He's not Huntress or Pyramid Head who can hit them through pallets. He's not Doctor who can deny them the ability to throw pallets. And he's not even Clown who can slow them down to keep them from getting to pallets. He has a lot working against him. However, he does have the upside of that insta-down. If he can be smart with his insta-down, Ghostface can be very scary. And for as finicky as his power is, sometimes that works in his favor. I've had so many times where I have Ghostface dead in the center of my screen, and I am staring at him. I am trying to break him out of his Night Shroud, and it's just not working. And it's very frustrating as a survivor, which is why Ghostface, he can be fun to go against, but he can also be very, very frustrating because you do have those moments where you feel like you kind of got screwed by the game. But overall, he's a decent stealth killer in a time where stealth killers are really not effective. So unfortunately, that means he's kind of comfortably in the D tier. I do wish he were better. I'm going to say that for everybody that's not super great. I do wish he were better, but as it stands, he could be a lot worse. So 22 is a decent ranking for him. 21. He's in 21. And then number 20, we have another licensed killer. We're going 3 straight licensed killers in a row. We have the Nightmare, Freddy Krueger. Now, for as scary as Freddy may seem in the movies and as powerful as he may seem, he's neither of those things in Dead by Daylight. So, what he essentially is, if I wanted to boil it down, is he's a better clown, a very slightly better clown. So, Clown throws bottles to slow survivors down. Freddy puts dream snares, which are these little blood puddles on the ground that when a survivor who's asleep runs through them, they make this screaming notification letting you know where they are, and they slow down a little bit. Freddy can put these strategically around the map, which again allows for some planning. There is the issue of survivors who know that you're not near and they see those puddles. A lot of times they'll run through as many as they can to try to take out whatever you're doing in terms of planning. So it's not super useful to put them, all around the map. They're kind of like Hag or Trapper, where whatever traps you're putting down, you want them to be generally close to you so you can get value out of them. But where I am a little underwhelmed by Dream Snares, one thing Freddy does really well is mobility, in that he can teleport to any generator on the map every so often. It varies how long it's going to take you depending on add-ons and how many people are asleep. The more people asleep, the more quickly that power is going to charge, and you're going to be able to teleport to any gen on the map. That's why he does have some synergy with things like Discordants or Tinkerers, so he can find which gens he needs to go to, and he can go deal with that. The only issue is that once he goes there, he has kind of a low lethality rate. So unfortunately, Freddy is not super effective in those ways. I'm not really going to touch on Pallet Freddy, which is a version where instead of Dream Snares, he gets Dream Pallets that he can put up everywhere, because they're pretty effective at lower levels, but high skill survivors tend to see right through those. They know what's been thrown and what hasn't, and unfortunately, they're just not really going to bother with throwing those down. So if you bring Pallet Freddy, I think he drops all the way down to Legion levels on this, but we're assuming you're using Dream Snare Freddy. And, you know, he's got a lot of weaknesses. There was a time where Freddy was really good, a time where he was much worse than this. Right now, he's in the zone of being not great. He's not a very good killer, but his mobility is nice. He's all right in a one-on-one chase. Not anything too special, but he's all right in a one-on-one chase. And overall, I don't have much in the way of buffs I would work for on him. You know, he's in a decent place. Not every killer needs to be super strong, so I'm okay with where Freddy is right now. Next up, we have number 19, the Deathslinger. And this is starting the C tier for me. This is where there's a clear jump between Freddy and Deathslinger. Now, is it a jump that is going to say, oh yeah, now we're in the really good killers? No. Deathslinger has a lot of issues, and he had a lot of issues before he was nerfed. I do not understand the nerf. I am really confused why they decided to nerf Deathslinger. It didn't seem necessary. It just really did not seem like a necessary thing to do, but it's what behavior chose to do, and I'm sure Deathslinger mains hate it, but I do think that, look, so the issue with Deathslinger was that he could aim down his sights instantly, and then he could stop aiming down his sights instantly, which meant he could put you in this situation where he aims down the sights and you have to dead hard or throw the pallet or whatever. And if you don't do that, he can instantly not aim down the sights and he can hit you, or he could just aim down the sights instantly, hit you with the harpoon, reel you in, because if you have good aim, it wasn't that hard to do. I don't have good aim, but a lot of Deathslinger players do. Deathslinger was a bit of a headache in that regard. He was very, very deadly in the one-on-one, but even when he was at his best in the one-on-one, I think he was a B-tier killer. I don't think he was anything too special, and the reason for that is that his mobility is atrocious. It takes Deathslinger forever to get around the map. So if he makes a bad read on going to a gen that's not being worked on, it really costs him. It is really going to be difficult to make up the lost ground. And again, he may have to resort to some nastier tactics like proxy camping or slugging, but as we've already discussed, slugging is not at its most effective right now. There was a time where slugging was a lot more dangerous for killers. Not for killers. I'm sorry, I misphrased that. I guess it was a lot more effective for killers, not dangerous. It was more dangerous for survivors and a lot more effective for killers. But the way it is right now, slugging is not a bad strategy, but it's definitely not a super reliable strategy. Slinger is in this interesting position of being extremely good in a one-on-one chase, and I would actually say that everybody in C tier is pretty good in a one-on-one chase, but he cannot pressure a full team. He really struggles to pressure a full team, and he can't bounce around in the same way that a lot of killers can. Even some of them that are below him on this ranking are actually better at bouncing around than he is. So Slinger's got a lot that he would need to work on to become a better killer. But as it stands, his one-on-one chase potential is really strong. And if you are coming over from a game like Call of Duty or Fortnite or something like that where you have to have a lot of aim, Deathslinger may be your guy. Deathslinger rewards those with FPS experience. He is a ranged killer. He's the worst ranged killer, but he is still a ranged killer, and that is a benefit to him. And he has nice synergy with some pretty good perks. I think Save the Best for Last on Deathslinger is extremely good because there are not many killers that can use their power and still get value out of Save the Best for Last. So, you know, look, Deathslinger's not a lost cause. There's plenty to like here. He just, oh gosh, his mobility is so bad. And then the big nerf, right? The big nerf for him was that they made his terror radius 36 meters instead of 24. The issue with that being that he's so slow, you know he's coming, you hear him coming, you're gonna know that Deathslinger is right around the corner, and that's really a massive disadvantage for him. I wish they would set that back. I would have no issue with the nerf if they would just set his terror radius back, but they have made no indication that they're going to do that. So until they do, Deathslinger, I'm pretty comfortable leaving him at number 19. Number 18 is a killer who was previously a lot worse than this, but he's gotten some love, and the Trickster. It is the Trickster. Now, Trickster, to me, will be defined as being a worse Huntress. He is a lot like Huntress, but he's worse in every way. Well, every way is probably harsh. He is faster. He moves at a base speed that's faster. And I guess you could say he could down more survivors if he activates main event. But that's kind of the issue, right? So if he uses his secondary ability to throw the knives he can activate something called main event. The issue is that main event is almost never useful. I really struggle to find times to use main event. And even when I think, okay, I'll use main event now, I find that it's just not that useful. It is not a very useful power. And really, I would say play Trickster without main event in mind. Don't even think about main eventing unless you just get presented a golden opportunity. You're like, well, I could down 2 people if I main event here. Then you can really start thinking about it. But unless you get something like that, I wouldn't even bother. It's just not worth it. That being said, Trickster has some really strong chase potential. If you can catch survivors in a dead zone, he is one of the rare killers that can get both hits. So obviously to down a survivor, you have to hit them twice. One to injure them, the second one to down them. And if Trickster can get somebody in a dead zone, his ability makes it so that he can actually get both of those hits without being super good at the killer, right? It's not like you have to just be a nutty Trickster. I'm talking about some wild trick that, oh man, yeah, I mean, if you're an S-tier Trickster, you can, if you got 2,000 hours on Trickster, you can do that. No, if you're a decent Trickster, you can do it. You can get both of those hits. Of course, he's like any other killer. He's going to struggle with some of the things that survivors can do to put distance between you and himself, right? So any kind of exhaustion perk, especially Dead Hard or something like that, is going to be a little frustrating. I think that the new Jonah perk, where he runs further after being injured, is probably not great for Trickster. But that being said, there are positives here. He definitely has positives he's working with. And, there was a time where I thought, Trickster's wildly underrated. But then the more I played him, I started going up against better and better teams, and I learned that better and better teams are really good about using loops against Trickster. They're really good about making it so his knives just can't hit them, just barely can't hit them, and it can be frustrating. But that being said, I've seen some really good Tricksters play, and when I watched them play, I realized that this character does have potential to be a pretty scary killer. But then again, you could say that about anybody in the cast, I guess. So I'm okay with him being 18. You could make a case he could be a little higher, a little lower, but usually I like to split the difference there. And he's good in a one-on-one chase. He can injure an entire team pretty quickly. But unlike Legion, who can also injure an entire team pretty quickly, Trickster has better lethality. He can injure them and then he can seal the deal. So I think he's pretty comfortably here at number 18. Next up, we have the Wraith. Now, the Wraith was once one of the worst killers in the game. Nowadays, he's nowhere near that. He's much better. It doesn't mean he's good, but, I think the nice thing about the Wraith is when he cloaks, he gets a lot of mobility. When he comes out of cloak, this has been nerfed a little bit. They had buffed him and give him the windstorm so that he comes out and he's very, very fast. They nerfed that a little bit, but he's still pretty good. He is still in a pretty good spot right now in terms of if you position yourself well as Wraith, you're going to get easy hits. Now, I say easy. Obviously, the better the survivors are, the more they're going to be watching out for that. And for the millionth time in this video, but actually probably for the last time I have to point out, because this is the last stealth killer, Spine Chill counters him very hard. You know when he's coming. And in addition to Spine Chill lighting up, you're going to hear that little sound he makes. And obviously he'll start shimmering as he gets closer. So, there are negatives about Wraith for sure. But out of the stealth killers, I think he's easily the best one. Which is kind of cool because he's free, right? If you have the game, you have Wraith. So if you want to practice as a stealth killer, you don't just have to practice as any old stealth killer. You get to play who I think is the best stealth killer. There's a lot to like about what Wraith has going on, particularly his add-ons. Wraith has some crazy cool add-ons that are both effective and fun. There is really nothing like breaking a pallet at 100% the speed that you normally would because you stack the two add-ons that would do that. One buffs at 60%, one buffs at 40%. Wraith can be very, very fun to play in those regards. And there's a lot to like there. So is Wraith going to be one that you see maybe in tournament play against the highest level competition possible? No. And, there are some negatives, right? If you have a really strong Survive with Friends and they all have really strong flashlights, they can do something called light burning you, where if you're cloaked, they can shine their light on you and it stuns you and knocks you out of cloak. It's unfortunate. The Wraith does have weaknesses like that, and there's nothing he does so well that I have to put him higher up. But as far as C-tier killers go, it already shows the difference between the D-tier and the C-tier because a really good Wraith can feel rather suffocating if you're not entirely sure what you're doing. Next up at 16, we have the Doctor. Now, the Doctor, I originally had him a little higher, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that, so much of his power kit is kind of negligible, right? So he does all the insanity stuff. Oh, look, it's a fake doctor. Oh, look, it's reverse skill checks. Those do nothing against really good survivors, or even just good survivors. Take out the really, right? It's just good survivors. They know how to deal with those. I'm not even that good of a survivor, and I can't tell you the last time I missed a skill check because it went backwards, or because, you know, an illusionary doctor was nearby. No, I mean, obviously, you know, it's not the real doctor. Now, the illusionary doctors do give the doctor some information with different add-ons and different madness tiers. He can actually see those, and that'll tell him, hey, a survivor's in that general area. And that's one thing Doctor does really, really well. So if you're like me and you are tracking challenged, you really struggle to find survivors, probably more often than you'd like to admit, Doctor is your guy. Doctor can release the static blast. And, you know, most survivors don't care to hide from it. You know, really, the more that a survivor cares about hiding from static blast, the more likely it is you don't have to worry about them anyway, because they're probably newer. It's going to raise their madness tier. It's going to make life a little harder for them, but it's nothing too drastic. But what it does that's really nice for the doctor is it tells them, okay, look at that. We have all 4 of them nearby. You can use it, especially maybe you just down somebody and you want to make sure there's not a flashlight save attempt coming in, or you know, somebody coming in to sabo the hook or something. You can send out a quick blast and see where they are. Or let's say you don't have barbecue and chili or another perk used to track survivors. You can hook somebody and then send out the static blast, and you can figure out where everybody is. It's kind of a good substitution for any of those perks. You know, instead of bringing Lethal Pursuer, you can just do it at the beginning of the game. Oh, boom, they're right there. He's also the only killer that really gets benefit out of using Distressing. Distressing is an F tier perk. It is garbage. It works against you, and you know it works against you because they offer you blood points just for bringing it. It's kind of almost trying to lose, but in the case of the Doctor, because he wants as large of a tear radius as possible, Distressing works really well. So props to Doctor for actually making use of a pretty underutilized perk. Or maybe it's properly utilized because it's so bad. But there's a lot to like about Doctor. I think the best thing he has going, and the only reason he's as high up as he is because if Doctor times his zaps right, he can actually deny survivors the ability to vault a window or pallet, or even throw the pallet. So you're going to get some free hits if you learn how to hit that. But be careful about it. It's definitely a trap I've fallen into a lot, where I try too often to get the zap, and that can be abused by survivors. He is definitely a noob stomper of a killer, but I think that Doctor's potential against good Survive with Friends teams is actually kind of underrated. Doctor is constantly going to know where everyone is. He can deny their ability to throw pallets or get crucial vaults. You know, there are things going for this killer. This is not a bad killer by any means. And I would say if you're new to the game especially, Doctor is a really good place to look. Or maybe if you're struggling, you know, you've been playing for a couple 100 hours and you still haven't really found your main, put some time into Doctor, see if you like it, because he is a pretty rewarding killer. The barrier to entry is really low for this killer, but then his ceiling is actually pretty damn high. So Doctor, he's pretty comfortable where he is. Last up for C tier, we have the Cenobite, Pinhead. Oh man, Pinhead, he varies so much by what his add-ons are. If he has things like the Engineer's Fang, suddenly he becomes a much scarier killer. But I'm assuming you're not going to be bringing iridescent add-ons every game, or even most games. So let's assume that you're using even purple or green add-ons. Suddenly he becomes essentially what I think he was designed to be, what a lot of newer killers seem to be designed to be. He is really good in a one-on-one chase and really bad in most other ways. So his mobility is really bad. There is no getting around it. His mobility is terrible. What sets him above the killers who also have terrible mobility, however, is the chain hunt. So if the lament configuration is not figured out by the survivors, which honestly, it shocks me how often they seem to ignore it. If it's not figured out, chains are going to start shooting around the map against all 4 survivors, right? Until somebody solves the box. And heaven help them if you find the box. It's going to get a lot worse for them. So he does have that going for him. Which I feel like is the term I'm using like a million times here. Oh, he has that going for him. He has that going for him. Like it's almost passive aggressive, isn't it? Like, well, he has that going for him. But, you know, he does benefit. When I first saw his power, I was like, oh, that's going to be hard to use. It's actually not. Hitting people with chains is not extremely difficult. The better the survivor you're going against, the more difficult they're going to make that for you. That should be pretty obvious. But I don't think it's actually all that difficult. And sometimes you'll even see survivors who dead hard to avoid a chain. And that's just nutty to me. That's almost never worth it. So don't do that if you're a survivor. I mean, if you're going to go down otherwise, yeah, obviously then you want to do it. But outside of that, don't do it. You know, he's strong in the one-on-one chase. And there's a place for that. And his map pressure is better than a lot of the people below him, but this is still not a killer that I look at and I think, wow, what an S tier killer, what an A tier killer. I considered B tier for him, but I think he's good here at the head of C as being the clear-cut best C tier killer. If you do bring either of his iridescent add-ons, though, he probably goes up to A tier. He gets nutty with some of those add-ons. Moving into the B tier here, we have the Nemesis from Resident Evil. Now, this is my secondary main. When I'm not playing Clown, I'm probably playing Nemesis. And I really, really enjoy Nemesis. And I wish I could put him a little higher, but there's some things working against him. Firstly, he did just get some minor nerfs to the add-ons that you're going to be using most consistently with him, being Marvin's Blood. I think Marvin's Blood is probably the most common add-on he has, and it's one that requires fewer tentacle hits for him to tier up to 2 and 3, which is a really, really nice thing for him. Those numbers were decreased from 33% to 25%, and that's not a major nerf, but it is something. What really hurts Nemesis for me is twofold. Firstly, it's that it takes him a minute to get to tier 3. It's going to take him, unless the team is giving you a lot, it's going to take a few gens before you get to tier 3, which is not great. In addition to that, survivors can use vaccines, which, I mean, I get why they're in the game, but I really do feel like it's unfortunate that he infects people, and then you can have an entire team that's all infected, and then boom, all of a sudden none of them are infected if they all use the vaccines, because you're going to have, I think you have 5 vaccines in the game, which seems a little crazy to me. There's really no strategy required. If you're playing Survivor and you're infected, it's probably a good idea to use the vaccine because, I mean, realistically, you're just making you're making his job a lot harder. Nobody shreds pallets like Nemesis, which is his greatest strength. So when Nemesis gets to tier 3, in addition to having a ranged attack that is pretty easy to hit, he can also eviscerate pallets. He eviscerates pallets like it's nothing. If he comes up to a pallet and he wants it gone, that pallet is gone. And he can even hit people over certain loops. Now, high loops, it's not happening. Medium loops, it's probably not happening. But any low loop, all of a sudden, that becomes a very terrifying prospect for survivors. So, again, Nemesis, he's a strong killer. That's why he had to be B tier instead of C tier for me. There are weaknesses in his game, but overall I think Nemesis is very strong. And if I had to define, I like to compare killers to other killers to kind of create this cohesion so you can understand, if this one's working for you, you might like this one or whatever. I would put him as being a weaker Pyramid Head. He has a lot of similarities to Pyramid Head, but he's just weaker, and that's okay. He's still pretty strong. Pyramid Head is very strong, so to be a slightly weaker Pyramid Head is actually not that bad of a place to be. Next up, we have a killer who should be a lot higher, but I just can't do it. That is the Twins. So the Twins should be higher. If you look at what they do, they should be ranked as an even better killer. The issue is that technical bugs have plagued this killer from the very beginning. Tragically, right? Because tragically, you wish every killer could play exactly as intended, but there is just such a delay getting from Charlotte to Victor, and especially from Victor to Charlotte, that it is maddening to play the Twins sometime. Despite this, I still find the Twins to be rather effective. There is nobody in the game who can slug quite like the Twins. If you're going up against a Twins player who is really, really good with Victor, GG, it's done. They can be so scary if they use Victor efficiently. Really, I would say, I know that what you're probably expecting because of what I've talked about already, right? If they're the king and queen of slugging, you're going to say, oh, well, the weakness is that slugging's not as good as it used to be. And that's true. That does unfortunately hurt them. But the most painful thing for the Twins is that if you latch Victor onto a survivor's back, what really good survivors are going to do more often than not is they are not going to throw him to the ground. They're going to run away with him. And all of a sudden, what you're going to have is a situation where you're an M1 killer and your little baby brother is on the survivor's back. And maybe you get some information about where other survivors are because of Victor who gives you that information. It's unlikely, though. It's unlikely you get any value out of it. And actually, now that I think about it, I don't think he gives you information, even if he's on their back. It is unfortunate. Anytime you have a killer whose power can be taken away entirely, or at least greatly dampened by actions of the survivors, actions that are not very hard to complete, that's going to hurt. That is really, really not great. And for that reason, I can't put the twins any higher. Between that and the fact that slugging's not in like it used to be, it's not the best time to be the twins. You add on the technical limitations, and you see where I have my reservations. That being said, the upside to these killers is nutty, and I would say that if you want a killer that can demoralize teams that go in expecting to bully, the twins are a really good place to start. The twins are crazy strong. They just have too many things working against them to be in A tier. I considered putting them in A tier, but I just can't quite do it. But I think they're fine where they are. I think they're fine where they are. I am okay with this ranking. And I hope that Twins players are too, because I think this is a killer that gets disrespected a lot. The Twins are very good. This is a very good killer, and they're actually pretty fun to play as. So I would pick them up. I'd give them a try if I were you. To go back to my catchphrase of the day, right? They've got a lot going for them. Up next at number 12, we have the newest killer in the game. We have the Artist, who to me is kind of the opposite of the Twins. I don't think she's that fun to play as. I don't think she's that fun to play against, but I can't deny what she does well. She's good about getting information on where survivors are and then shutting down loops. So in the same way that I've talked about a lot of killers being really good in a one-on-one, so is the Artist. The Artist is really good in a one-on-one. What separates her is her information gathering abilities. She can send out crows to 3 different directions, 3 different generators, and she, more often than not, she's going to hit a generator that has a survivor on it. So she can cut out a lot of the guessing game, a lot of the time trying to figure out where survivors are, and she can get right into what she's good at, the chases. That being said, is she the best one-on-one chaser? No, by no means. And overall, I don't know. She's, as the most recent killer in the game, she's the one who could really move up or down the list the most without any kind of nerfs or buffs, right? The more that people figure out how to play as her and against her, the more likely she is to move. Right now, I think she's just comfortably in that realm of being an above average killer. She's pretty good. Is she great? No, doesn't seem to be. Is she terrible? Certainly not. Far from it. Again, I do think that this killer's potential has not really been figured out yet, but my initial, after having about a month of playing with her here, she's good in the one-on-one. She's really, really good in the one-on-one, and she can block off different vault locations and pallets and all that. That's pretty scary, but at the same time, this is a power that, because so many killers are getting some variation of this power, survivors are becoming more and more competent in countering that. And obviously, anything you could say that other killers are susceptible to, she is too. I mean, there's nothing that can be done about some things like Dead Hard or Borrowed Time or any of that, so kind of unfortunate, but overall, she is a very good killer. Next up, at number 11, we have debatably my favorite killer, and that is the Demogorgon. Now, tragically, newer players will not be able to buy the Demogorgon. They will not be able to access this character because Stranger Things took them out of the game. Very sad, very unfortunate. And not just because it's always sad to see something like that happen where kind of corporate greed interferes with players having a good time, but I think it's sad in the sense that Demogorgon is so fun to play as, to play against, just a great time. Demogorgon is really, really good in the one-on-one chase, but has actually pretty underrated mobility. Those portals are really effective. They're great for so many things. Obviously getting around the map, sure, but then information gathering. And if you bring the add-on, which is an iridescent, so I'm not assuming you're doing this every game, but the Demogorgon has an add-on where when it uses the portals, it can actually see where everyone is on the map. It sees their auras for, I think, like 4 seconds or something, which is pretty crazy. That is actually pretty insane that just by using those portals, you can see exactly where everyone is. That's good. That is really good. And then the shred ability is nutty. It is a really strong power. It shreds pallets. It covers the distance. If you use it off of a hill or something like that, you're going to rubber band yourself across the map. It is pretty cool to see. This is a very, very good killer. This is the killer that was made with Save the Best for Last in mind. Even though Save the Best for Last was released years before the Demogorgon came to the game, it really saw its true potential met when the Demogorgon was added. This is a great killer. Out of all the killers here, if I'm telling you to pick up one that's sitting in your roster that you just haven't played a lot of, I know that newer players can't capitalize on this, and I hate that. It makes me so sad. But wow, make it the Demogorgon. Play the Demogorgon. This is a great killer, and it has the nice benefit that people really enjoy going up against the Demogorgon. People really seem to enjoy this killer, and for good reason. Demogorgon is challenging to go against. And really good Demogorgons are terrifying. I mean, they are really, really scary. So I'm very, very happy with this ranking for Demogorgon. If anything, it could go a little higher. The only real issue that it has is that survivors can cleanse the portals, but even that acts as a bit of a passive slowdown, because instead of doing generators or healing each other or anything like that, anything that's a little more productive, they're sealing your portals. So great, right? That's a win for you because it does not take long to put the portals down. We're now entering the top 10. We're actually not out of B tier yet. We have 2 more to go. We're entering the top 10, and I think this is going to be one of my more controversial placings, but I'm putting the Hillbilly at number 10. Now, a lot of people would have put Billy down in D tier, maybe C tier. I don't think so. I think he's high B tier, and I understand there are things working against Billy. So obviously, the overheat mechanic, it's stupid. It does not need to be here for Billy. I can understand the argument for why the Cannibal has the overheat mechanic. I cannot, for the life of me, understand Billy having it, other than to say that Behavior looked at it, they said, we're adding this overheat mechanic to this chainsaw killer. And then somebody else was like, oh, wait, but we have 2 chainsaw killers. It's like, oh, yes, good. Throw it on Billy, too. That's the only thing I can figure here, because Billy cannot abuse his chainsaw in a kind of scummy way, and the same with Bubba can. So I am just really not sure why Billy has it, and I am 1000% for them removing the overheat mechanic. It was an interesting idea. I really don't think it was necessary. I don't think anybody was asking for this, and it is a real deterrence to Billy. Billy would be higher up than this if the overheat was not such a big problem. Problems aside, though, this is still a killer with debatably the best mobility in the game. I wouldn't say it is the best mobility in the game. More on that in a bit. But Billy can get from one side of the map to the other extremely quickly, even on maps like Larry's, which is an indoor map, or the game. These are still maps that Billy can traverse pretty quickly. A good Billy can still get around those maps pretty well. You are never truly out of the Hillbilly's range. Billy can cover the distance. He can erase the distance between you. He can get right up on you. And good Hillbillies are really good about getting their chainsaws in. I know a lot of people complain about, oh, it takes too long to charge up the chainsaw, or oh, it's, for all the work, it's just not worth only getting the 1 insta-down. But I disagree. I think insta-downs like this, Michael and Ghostface would take those in a heartbeat. These are crazy effective when done well. And when you pair Billy with some of the perks that make chainsaws easier, something like Bamboozle to block off vaults, Billy gets really scary. Add in to that the fact that he can shred pallets like few others, and Billy is very good. Billy, at one point in time, was viewed as the 2nd best killer in the game. And I guess technically before Nurse was added, he was the best killer in the game. While he's not in that conversation anymore, he's largely not in the A tier / S tier conversation anymore. In addition to having stronger competition now, it's also the fact that the overheat mechanic is just so bad. It is so bad for him. Outside of that, though, Billy is insanely powerful, and I don't want to sound ignorant, right? Because I see really good Dead by Daylight players saying Billy's worse than this. I don't see it. I do not see these weaknesses. I think Billy is still insanely strong and still extremely viable against really, really good teams. Unless you're me playing as him, and then you're going to lose every time because Billy is extremely difficult. It's kind of unfortunate that he's one that new players start off with, because he has a pretty high learning curve. You talk about the floor for a certain killer. His floor is it's pretty bad. He doesn't have a high floor. Bad Billies are really fun to face because you feel like a looping god, but Billy, the downside is massive, but the upside is even larger, and I'm okay with him cracking the top 10. Next, we have number 9, who I think is probably going to be viewed as my most underrated killer by some. That is the Plague. Now, I actually think the Plague had a time where she was much lower than this, but in addition to a couple of small buffs and some little reworks here and there, what really vaults Plague into the very top of B tier and towards the number 9 ranking is the fact that she counters the current meta better than any other killer, right? She is so good for this healing meta because survivors are left with one of 2 choices. Once they're infected, they can either choose to just sit there and not be able to use Circle of Healing, or they can go cleanse at a pool and give the Plague the ability to be much more deadly. Plague's lethality is really up there. I mean, her lethality is one of the higher marks I would give in this game. really the only issue I have with her, the big issue, the real reason I can't put her in A tier, her mobility is terrible, and her power is somewhat dictated by survivors. And a killer whose power is somewhat dictated by survivors, especially to the degree that Plagues is, that's unreliable. That is really unreliable, and I can't quite give her any higher of a ranking. But that being said, out of 26 killers to be the 9th best, we're obviously getting towards pretty esteemed company, and I think Plague fans will be happy with this ranking. Moving into the A tier, we have 5 killers in this tier. Moving into the A tier, we have the Oni. Oni is going to kick it off for us. And Oni, you know, oh man, there would have been a time Oni would have been a little higher than this. But I would say nobody has been hit harder by the healing meta. Outside of Legion, nobody's been hit harder than the Oni. Oni is all about injuring people, keeping them injured, and sucking up that sweet, sweet blood while they're injured. This current meta kind of counters what Oni likes to do. That being said, it should tell you just how strong his Demon Dash ability is that he's still up here, that he is all the way at number 8. When Oni goes into his Demon Dash ability, he becomes like Hillbilly on steroids. He becomes a Hillbilly that nobody's debating where he falls on the tier list, right? Nobody's saying, oh, he's D tier, and then other people are saying A tier, whatever. No, everybody's like, yeah, A tier. This is an A tier killer. He can go around the map without hitting walls or anything like that, without hitting trees or whatever it is, and breaking his momentum. He can just roll off of those. It is so much easier to get downs with Hillbilly's Demon Dash than it is with Hillbilly's Chainsaw Sprint. And even if survivors are trying to go do the whole, oh, we're going to run into a corner and heal here, they're still going to leave behind pools of blood that eventually the Oni is going to get to, and he's going to be able to utilize those, and it's going to be a really bad day for survivors. In addition to that, it should be noted that the Demon Dash gives him a lot of mobility. So he goes from being an M1 killer with no power at all to being a killer who can get around the map and do everything I said about Billy. You're never safe. You're never out of his range. He's always right there. Nobody snowballs better than Oni, I would say. I don't think anybody snowballs better than him. You can make a case for some killers, but I would say Oni is the best snowball killer in the game. He has a very specific use, and nobody does what he does better than him. Yes, there are weaknesses. Yes, the current meta is pulling against him, which is why he's at the bottom of A tier instead of closer towards the top or even at the very top. But that being said, there is a lot to like about what Oni brings to the table. And if you're just going off of fun factor, I think Oni's pretty fun for both sides, so do consider playing Oni. Next, we have number 7, the Cannibal, Leatherface. Now, this one, ooh, goodness, this one feels controversial. My poor boy, I guess I really just have something for chainsaw killers. People really want to put Leatherface a lot lower than this, and I don't get it. You want to talk about a specialized killer? I think that Leatherface is specialized in 2 ways. He is specialized in that he is absolutely lethal in his one-on-one chasing capabilities, and then he is S plus tier in defending. And people may, they may get mad about camping or proxy camping or just hanging a little too close to the hook or a down survivor or whatever. But the reality is that can be a very effective thing to do, and he's one of the few killers that can actually kind of counter things like borrowed time. And if you go in to the basement to try to make a save against Bubba, you're probably not coming out. You're going to go on the hook instead. You're trading at best. And that's pretty strong, because most killers, what happens is you go in, you get the person off, BT, then you get hit, and you start a little chase, and you try to get as far away from, the survivors, they try to get as far away from the basement as possible, and you might lose the leverage of the basement, because the basement is very powerful. That's not really a concern for Bubba. Bubba is pretty nutty with the basement, and I don't know. I would say that Bubba does those 2 things so well that some of his weaknesses just don't really matter to me. Can he pressure gens across the map very well? Not really, no. But is he elite in the one-on-one chase? Yeah, I would say when it comes to a one-on-one, I would say you have 1, 2, maybe 3 killers that are better in a one-on-one chase than him. Bubba, it's crazy to me just how powerful Bubba can be. I understand that his lack of mobility is a real mark against him, and that's why he's not higher. But if he had great mobility, he'd be busted. If Bubba had, if he had S tier mobility, he'd be an S tier killer. He would be unstoppable. So he needs to have some kind of weakness to his game, and I actually think he's a pretty balanced killer. Bubba is very, very good. And what's really cool about Bubba is you don't actually have to be that good with Bubba to play kind of efficiently. Right? Or maybe not efficiently, but to get some kills, to get some hooks that you wouldn't have gotten with other killers. So if you're new to the game, in addition to having barbecue and chili, which everybody wants because it lessens the blood point grind, he's really noob friendly. But he's kind of like Doctor. He's super noob friendly, but the ceiling is deceptively high. So I would highly recommend you give Bubba a try. And I get it. Not everyone's going to think that he belongs up this high, but I don't want to put him any lower. I think he's very, very good. That being said, if I had to knock him down a little bit, I could easily see a world where you say Oni or Plague is better than him. But right now, I'm okay with him being at number 7. He's a really solid killer. Next at number 6, we have the Hag, which is kind of hard because I'm taking on the internet's darling with this one. I know a lot of people who swear by how good Hag is despite never playing Hag. And look, I realize, yeah, Hag, when played ideally, is terrifying. I completely realize that. However, it's not as if Hag is unbeatable, right? And there are some killers that damn near border on unbeatable. The issue with Hag is that there are things survivors can do to make her life so much harder. So firstly, if they all have flashlights, your job is, it sucks. It sucks because flashlights can erase Hag traps. So if you go in against a 4-stack that all has flashlights, good luck. It's going to get a lot harder for you. In addition to that, survivors aren't stupid at the high levels, right? I mean, maybe they are, but they know how to counter certain things. So if a survivor knows that, if they know that they're up against a Hag and they see their buddy go down and they know that they know where some of your traps are, what they're going to do is they're going to run through those and they're going to take them out of the game, right? So then you're going to have to go back to that place and you're going to have to set your traps again, or you're going to have to cut your losses, neither of which are ideal for you. Hag is like Bubba in that she is a defensive killer, and she's like Trapper in that she is a planning killer who is really slow at the start of the game. Hag lives and dies by the 3-gen. The 3-gen is very important for the Hag. And also altruism. Altruism really benefits the Hag. If you go up against an altruistic squad, your life is going to be way, way easier. However, again, we're talking about maybe some survivors making mistakes. And if you're going up against a really good teams are good about not 3-genning themselves. And they don't tend to be just stupidly altruistic. So Hag has got to be careful there, and I think she does suffer in those ways. In addition to the fact that, yeah, like I said, she's countered hard by flashlights. And if you do have something like Urban Evasion against you, which isn't super common, but it's also not a perk you just don't see, Urban Evasion counters Hag extremely hard. So to me, there are too many downsides for her to be an S-tier killer. But that being said, when you look at the upside of Hag, if you're going up against a Hag who is constantly, they're constantly hitting, shift or control to teleport to your trap, or you're one of those Hags who's rerouted it so that you just have to scroll your wheel, and the whole time you're just scrolling your wheel, and as soon as you scroll, as soon as you teleport, you're ready to swing, you're gonna get some free hits. That's great. Hag does have some solid add-ons. Hag's upside is insanely high, but I actually think that out of all the killers up this high, her downside is so just stupidly low. In a game where everything goes wrong, Hag cannot recover. This is not a killer that is super good at dealing with that kind of adversity. So is Hag a really great killer? Yes, and I use the word great, not good. She's not just really good, she's great. She's a great killer. But a lot can go wrong for a Hag, so I just can't put her any higher than 6. Going into the top 5, we have the ultimate damned if you do, damned if you don't killer with Pyramid Head. There is, I'd say there's probably one killer who's better in the one-on-one chase than Pyramid Head. And look, obviously, we could talk about what bad Pyramid Heads are going to do, but good Pyramid Heads really don't miss their punishment of the damned very often. And it's really crazy to watch. They can hit all kinds of really impressive shots. They can set up that situation where, look, if you throw the pallet, they're going to hit you with punishment of the damned. If you don't throw the pallet, they're going to hit you with an M1. Very, very difficult to deal with. Very, very powerful. And, the funny thing is, it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there. So he also has the ability to send people to cages or insta-kill them if they're on their final hook. And what that does is that counters certain things that you would otherwise have to deal with. Obviously, DS being the big one, right? It is crazy to me that, if you're being swarmed by survivors with flashlights and you can't find a good wall to look at or something, just send the survivor to a cage. It doesn't matter if they blind you. If you know a DS is coming, send them to a cage. Send them down to Brazil. They don't care. It's not a thing for Pyramid Head. He doesn't have to deal with that. It's kind of nutty to me how many things Pyramid Head has going for him. With, again, as is the case for so many, the only real weakness, mobility. Mobility is, I mean, gosh, it feels like you're playing in molasses. This is a very slow killer. You could convince me that Pyramid Head is moving like 80% the speed of survivors. That's not true. He's a 115. He's a base movement speed killer, like a perfectly normal one. But man, he feels slow. But he kind of needs to feel slow, right? Because his power gives him such insane reach. And he does pair well with certain things like Nurse's Calling or whatever. So this is a really strong killer. And I'm happy with him being at 4. Even if the mobility would be that of somebody you expect to find down in the like low teens or 20s, right? Next up, rounding out the A tier at number 4, we have the Huntress. Now, Huntress is a killer who a lot of people, I mean, the consensus is that she's really good, but that's where you start to see a lot of, some people say she's the bottom of A tier, some say she's the bottom of S tier. You actually get some pretty hot takes on Huntress. I think she's A tier for a few reasons. A few positive reasons why she's A tier instead of anything lower, and a few negative reasons that keep her from being S tier. Firstly, her lullaby it's pretty bad. It definitely works against her in a lot of ways. You're going to know that the Huntress is relatively close. Relatively close being 36 meters or further. I mean, because the lullaby is larger than 36 meters. Now, you could argue that it could kind of lull people into a false sense of security, but realistically, against good survivors, no, it won't. What is nice, though, is that if you look, there are enough compilations you can go watch of like long-distance Huntress shots to realize just how crazy this can get. If somebody is really good with their hatchets, sometimes it can feel like there's nothing you can do. Especially, I'm talking about the cross-the-map stuff, but if you're talking in a one-on-one chase, really good Huntresses can hit all kinds of angles. I'm talking throwing them between multiple trees, throwing them over tractors, throwing them over, mid-sized loops that you didn't realize she could hit you over. Huntress is deadly in the one-on-one. The only reason she's not higher than she has that really, really bad base movement speed. She has her lullaby, which works against her. And then the big one for me, once she runs out of hatchets, she's useless. Once she's out of hatchets, she becomes a very bad killer. So she's going to have to hurry back and get some more hatchets. I mean, I guess technically she has that one add-on where she moves at 115 movement speed once she runs out of hatchets, but that's still just being a basic M1 killer, so that's not great. That's not like, oh, well, thank goodness for that. It just makes her slightly less terrible when she has no hatchets. So she can't down an entire team unless they're obviously just very stupid. Unless they play just really stupidly. And that works against her. But outside of that, lethality is a big thing in this game. How many people can you down and how quickly can you do it? And a good Huntress, especially if she has like the utility belt for extra hatchets or something, she can really do some substantial damage, and she can do it pretty quickly. So you always have to be careful with Huntress. You're never really out of her range. Just because unless you're on an indoor map where you know for a fact she can't cross-map you, you're always kind of in danger. You're always kind of at that point where she can use some things against you so that maybe you don't even know that she's aware of where you are, but she might know if she has things like Tinkers or whatever. Or maybe Discordance. Discordance is really good on Huntress. She has a lot of things that really elevate her above the rest of the pack. And I don't know, like I can't put her at S tier because of the weaknesses. But to me, she's a pretty comfortable pick as the top of A tier. Very few killers match her in terms of the skill ceiling. It really feels like there is no ceiling. Like you just keep getting better and better and better. Watch the best Huntresses, learn from what they do, and realize that your first 100 games are going to be pretty rough. It's going to take a long time to get good with Huntress. But once you do, she is crazy fun. Unless you're the survivor, and then she's not so fun. Moving into the S tier and the final 3 killers now. Ooh, number 3, the Nurse. Nope, the Nurse. Uh-oh. I did a funny. I goofed. I meant to say the Spirit. I was looking at a picture of the Nurse right now. I have them all in front of me right now, and I looked at Nurse, so I guess I just had a brain fart. But no, it's the Spirit. The Spirit was oh gosh. I'm sorry. I know that once I said Nurse, somebody went to the comment section like somebody had a oh he did it. He put Nurse to it. So I hope that person understands. I'm just not very smart, you know. I just make mistakes. But the spirit. Now the spirit, after being released, right? She just steadily kept climbing tier lists as people realized how good she was, up until the point where she was battling the nurse. Some people thought she had surpassed the nurse as the best killer in the game. I was never of that opinion, but I could see the case for it. Ultimately, whether or not you thought she was better than the nurse then, nobody really thinks she is now. I have not seen anybody making the case that she is currently better than the nurse, or the other person that's ahead of her, which, I mean, by process of elimination, you've probably figured out. But that being said, to go from debatably the best killer in the game to what I would consider pretty squarely the third best killer in the game, it's not much of a nerf. It's not like she's terrible now. It's not like she's even bad or just, oh yeah, she's good. She's all right. She's a decent killer. No, she's more than decent. She's more than pretty good. She's nutty. She's still nutty. And the really good spirits are still really, really hard to deal with. It's just that nowadays, that's kind of the thing. The worst spirits were really impacted by the nerf far more than the good spirits. The good spirits are still going to do an excellent job of keeping you guessing about where they are, where they're coming from, all that. You just have a little more time to deal with it. You have a little more time to try to figure it out. And it's not as much a 50-50 guessing game. So it comes down more to skill in that instance. And I do appreciate that. I think that's really, really cool. Overall, this is a crazy killer who is elite in the one-on-one chasing. Her mobility is really, really good. There's really nothing that Spirit does extremely poorly. And there are quite a few things she does really well. I think she more than earns her spot as being an S-tier killer, even if she's not the potential number one she used to be. Up next, we have number 2, the Blight. Now, there's going to come a day where the Blight's add-ons are nerfed. That day has got to come at some point, because Blight's add-ons are terrifying. Blight's add-ons are very, very scary, but that day does not seem to be anywhere close to happening right now, so we have to evaluate Blight as he is, and as he is really good. This is a killer that does almost everything well. You're never really safe, even if you're around the edge of something that other killers couldn't hit you. Blight has this habit of being able to kind of flick and get you. He can close that gap so rapidly, but then, you know, whereas some people couldn't close the gap and get a hit on you, Blight can. Good Blights are... I've gone up against a few Blights where I just felt like I had no chance. I felt like I had no chance against these Blights because they are able to keep such constant pressure across the entirety of the map. And they don't have to do things like camp or even proxy camp, because in the time that somebody else takes to go and make the rescue, somebody else is already getting downed. When played efficiently and effectively, the Blight's about as good as it gets. And what I like about Blight is actually there's a pretty massive skill curve, so you have to be good with Blight to maximize his potential or even come close to that. And that's why I think Blight is actually a generally pretty well-balanced killer, if maybe a little on the overpowered side. There's a lot to like there, and, you know, Blight, I mean, what are you going to say that's negative about him? The best way I can sum up Blight would be the number 1 killer in the game, if not for the absolute nutter that is number 1. So let's move into that. Number 1, Sally Smithson, the nurse. The nurse is number 1. I never moved her from number 1, even at the strength, like the height of the Spirit's strength. And the reason for that is very simple. Nurse's mobility is unmatched. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Oni can get to the other side of the map more quickly. You know, Blight can get to the other side more quickly. Hillbilly, whatever. There are people who can get to the other side of the map more quickly. But who else can ignore loops? Who else can say, I'm on this side of the loop and that survivor's on the other side? Here, split second. Now I'm over there. This is a teleporting killer. And the only reason she's not more controversial than she is because she came out so long ago that DBD players were essentially raised in the game, just kind of saying, okay, well, this is just part of it. Nurse is just part of it. She comes with the territory. She's been in the game for so long that people just don't even realize how absurd she is. But Nurse is crazy. This is the killer to play if your worst fear is losing. Now, here, that comes with a caveat. When you play her, you're going to lose a lot. You're going to lose a lot. But then you're going to start losing a little less. And then a little less. And all of a sudden, you're going to start realizing you're winning a lot more. And if you keep working at it and you play exclusively nurse and you just really maximize your nurse abilities, you're going to reach a point where you realize, oh wow, oh damn, I never lose. I almost never lose. The god tier nurses are just impossible to beat. If you're a survivor and you're going up against one of the top tier nurses, you're done. It's over. You're not going to beat her. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be a defeatist, but nurse takes the things that survivors have, the only ways they have of fighting back, and she says, yeah, screw those. I don't care about those. I'm not going to deal with those. Pallets, never heard of them. Vaults, yeah, doesn't matter. I can teleport. That's better. She is so strong. This is a killer. Oh, gosh. Nurse is crazy. Nurse is crazy. I don't even know if I want to say she's overpowered. I mean, I lean towards that, but like, I don't know. Watching a good nurse in action, it's just poetry in motion. This is an absolutely astonishingly powerful killer. And an easy choice for number 1 on this ranking. But that's going to do it for me. I know this was a bit of a longer video, so thank you to everyone who stuck around, who watched. I had a good time doing this, even if my throat is like super sore and I ended up talking for like an hour and a half. You know, I knew this was going to be a longer video. We're getting close to like an hour and a half, so again, thank you so much if you did stick around for it. If you're interested at all in hearing me talk about some of the more fun killers to play as or against, or maybe both, do let me know, because I think that would be an interesting list to do as well. I'm not gonna keep you around for any longer. I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you stick around for whatever the next video is. Thank you so much. You know, time is the most important resource you have, and you chose to give some of it to me. Thank you. I appreciate that so much. I hope I didn't waste your time. Let me know down below which picks you agree or disagree with the most. Do remember to keep it cordial with your fellow commenters. You know, be as mean as you want to me, but be nice to them. That's generally what I try to set as kind of the one of the few rules for this community, is just, you know, just be nice to each other. Even if you want to call me like a DD mega doo-doo because I put hag so low or cannibal so high or whatever. Call me a noob. Say I don't know what I'm talking about, and you're probably right. But thank you so much for tuning into this one. I will see you next time. But until then, I've been Das Food. Bye, friends.